Hey guys, back from my vacation last week. It was a good time, nice week off. But now should be back to videos at regular times. So let's jump right into today's video, which is about horror games. In my opinion, one of the hardest game genres to get right seems to be horror games. There's lots of them, but most fall short. There are many great horror games, but there's just so many more that are absolutely terrible. So, why do developers have such a hard time getting these right? What really needs to change to make these better? Most horror games use the same really old bad tactic, jump scares. In most, this is really the only way that the game tries to scare the player. Even one of the most popular horror games today, Five Nights at Freddy, relies solely on jump scares. Sure, it uses a little bit of environment, but really, all the tension and everything about the game is about the little animatronic guys jumping out at you. And for me, this gets boring really fast. For me, a horror game is more than just jump scares and having a good scream. Some of the best horror games I've ever played don't have any jump scares, or maybe just like one or two little ones. The fear comes from the environment and the atmosphere. The game that sits as the best horror game I have ever played is the one that's playing in the background here, PT. It's not even a game. It was released as a teaser for the now sadly cancelled Silent Hills game that I really wanted to play. The game takes place in this one hallway, and it's small, maybe a little claustrophobic, and you never know what's coming around that one corner in the hallway. The detail, the atmosphere, the sound, everything just comes together in this to make it an amazing horror game. Another game that isn't only a great horror game, but also just in general a great game, is Alien Isolation. This game sets the perfect environment, a deserted space station that's just falling apart. It takes the setting that made the first Alien movie so good and translates it perfectly into a video game. Next, they take that setting and throw in one alien, one xenomorph. This alien is unpredictable and actually functions in a way similar to how the alien in the original movie did. On top of these two things, it has a very compelling story that took me about 12 hours to get through. And these were 12 very enjoyable and terrifying hours. The only place that the game kind of falls apart is the last hour or two, where it kind of forgets that it's a horror game and just goes full on action. But I was still scared shitless for like 11 hours, so it was quite satisfying to give that alien what it deserved. So I've talked about two great horror games, but what about one that just isn't that good? Or, even better, what about a series that was fantastic and then forgot what made it that way? I'm talking about Dead Space. So the first Dead Space game is still to this day one of my favorite horror games. It is creepy, terrifying. The little alien monster things are super weird, kind of zombies, but also not. And it also has like a psychological part that makes you question whether or not the things are actually happening or if you're just going crazy. It has its fair share of jump scares and just kind of action shooter moments, but most of the time, you're kind of scared shitless. So, the first one did this, the second built on this, but in my opinion, didn't really improve on it. And then it had a really bad multiplayer one that just kind of sucked. And then there was the third game where the whole thing kind of fell apart. They added something that they seem to think makes games scarier, which is co-op, because I don't know about you, but when I'm not alone, it's definitely way scarier to do stuff. But I mean, come on. Most games that are scary have you being alone because the isolation makes everything scarier. One thing that they did with the co-op that was really cool is that one of the characters is going crazy and the other isn't. So if you're playing as Isaac, who was going crazy, you'd see monsters and stuff that weren't actually there. So you're shooting at stuff and the other person's like, "Whoa, what are you doing? There's nothing there." But as for everything else, it just wasn't a good horror game or even really a good game. Now, there's something that came out recently that I've talked about before that we'll hopefully see some great horror games on: VR. being in the game instead of just playing it could really change everything for the entire horror genre. One of the first kind of horror games that have come out is the Brookhaven Experiment. It's a great game. Now, it is just a simple wave shooter, but when these monsters kind of show up behind you and you see exactly how big they are and how creepy it is having them right in your face, it's terrifying. Another great horror game on VR is the demo for the game called Sisters. It's got a great atmosphere and environment, and the lack of control really adds to the fear, I find. Now, there's also a Boogeyman game in development and one based on the Paranormal Activity franchise, and they both look really promising and like they're really well done. So now another game that's coming is Resident Evil 7. The game has full VR support, and that makes me really excited. I've played through the demo a few times on PS4, and it has like a PT vibe, which makes me really excited, and adding VR to this will probably make me poop my pants. So horror games are a genre that developers seem to have a very hard time getting right. Some devs are really good at it and know exactly what they're doing, but most of the time they just kind of go for jump scares, and that gets old really quick. They forget that jump scares aren't really what make a game scary. It needs to be the entire game that does that. With VR added into the mix, I'm really looking forward to what's to come. Hopefully, over the next few months or years, we'll get a new batch of really fantastic horror games. They are better than someone who doesn't game on a system that's as good as theirs. So, back to Rob. Rob here really triggered me. He says that if you aren't in the top 1% of PC gaming, at least they skim it so they can understand what the score means, and then they can decide for themselves whether it's a game they want to play or not. People are smart enough to do this, right? Well, go to